So look, we're going to start with our first panel. So I invite up Leah Wilcox, who's a filmmaker and diver and was diving in the dark in Carlingford apparently last night. And then Sandra Woods, who's also a local diver and has been really engaged with us all the way along. With each, I think you've come to many, many things, Sandra, that Shifting Tides has organised. And then Dave Wall from the National Biodiversity Centre, who also organises the Explore Your Shore, and Dave also came and will, as an add-on, wasn't on the programme till very late, but at 4 o'clock Dave is offered to take people on an Explore Your Shore walk, short one, after today. And then last but not least, Claire Casey, who we didn't know for sure because she was on her holidays last week. Claire from Sea Search, who we've been working with a lot. So I'm going to move over here to the panel there. As we get started, folks, and Leah, I'm going to come back to you in a minute because we're going to show a couple of films with you. But before we do that, maybe if you could just give us just a couple of words on what brought you into the world of citizen science. Like, why? What was your personal motivation or journey in there? Dave, we might start with you.
How long have you got? My first citizen science project was in the mid-90s, working with the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group. We were doing citizen science-based population estimates of dolphins in the Shannon Estuary. And kind of after that then I grew a citizen science project on using car ferries to survey whales and dolphins at sea. So a lot of whaley dolphiny stuff initially. And then more recently, working with Ulster Wildlife, we were doing community engagement and citizen science. Now, you have to be careful here. Citizen science is not community engagement, but it's a great tool to engage communities because it gets people thinking about what's on the shore and at the same time helping to record data, information about the ecology of the places they love, really. And yeah, so I've been engaged in kind of marine and coastal intertidal citizen science since then.
I'm a diver, so I dive with Dundalk Sabaqua, and a lot of our dives are along Carlingford at Greenore and Carlingford Loch or the other side of the loch. So that's how I'm engaged, I suppose, with underwater, the world. And I was lucky enough then to get involved with this project last year. And I think, I've learned so much from it. It's just been brilliant engagement with the sea and with people and community and all of that. It's been fantastic. Also then I'm just involved in any underwater-based activities, really. So that's my local, and I live locally as well. So it's all on my doorstep, which is fantastic for me.
Fantastic, Sandra, thanks. Leah, we will come back to you for a longer bit, but maybe you'd just say, what was your first starting point with citizen science specifically?
Okay, yes. After the pandemic, very itchy feet, went to Turkey, immediately caught COVID, spent a week in a hotel room ordering takeaway food, loads of plastic, and I was like, traveling generates a lot of waste. And then I went to learn to scuba dive, which is something I'd always wanted to do. And then I came across the Marine Conservation Society of Istanbul, and they were doing things like coral transplanting projects and ghost net, picking up ghost nets and stuff. But I realized I needed to be a more self-sufficient diver before I could really participate in those, because that really appealed to me. And so I decided, well, rather than going traveling every time, generating all that, I want to dive at home regularly. So did the dry suit training for cold water and started diving in Dublin and in Kerry. And then I happened to come across Susie Kahn on a project, and luckily got involved in the Shifting Tides and started doing this film about divers doing the surveying training with Sea Search and becoming citizen scientists. So I'm still making that film. I've done the training myself as well, but I have a long way to go before I get my certificate. But it's lovely to be able to bring together filmmaking and diving for marine conservation.
Claire, your journey into being involved in citizen science, and from what perspective?
Yeah, I suppose citizen science was a relatively new concept for me. I didn't really sort of hear of the term itself until after I'd left uni for the second time. Didn't want to stay in the working world that long, clearly. Yeah, and I managed to get a traineeship with Ulster Wildlife around the same time that Dave was working there. And we would have done a lot of, we did quite a few different kinds of citizen science programs, mostly intertidal stuff. And then it was around that time as well that I first heard of Sea Search in a rather indirect way, because Dave was involved with as a volunteer with the project, and he had agreed to use the printer in the Ulster Wildlife offices to scan in an absolute plethora of historical forms. So myself and another one of the trainees were tasked with this rather tedious job of scanning them in, but it was quite interesting just in the mundane aspect of looking through those forms, of actually seeing sort of what kind of information was being captured on them. So it was a really kind of interesting insight into into some of the habitats that recreational divers were seeing around Northern Ireland. So yeah, that kind of solidified my introduction to citizen science and how people could get involved even without a formal scientific background.
And I guess that's the key of the word citizen, isn't it? It's not people with a scientific background who are getting engaged. So Leah, yeah, I wanted to come back to you, and I think you have a couple of little films just to show us to give a flavour of this. I guess is what we thought when we first engaged with people around the loch, that we wanted to see which artists and which people would maybe connect with each other. And we realised that lots of us are not going to get to dive in Carlingford Loch. And so when we came across Leah, we thought this would be amazing to kind of get that story as well as get some of. So the film is not ready yet, but it will be later this summer. But you want to just share with us a little bit about it?
A little bit of a spiel. The film comes in just at the end, if that's all right. I just wanted to start with a fun fact. 19th century naturalist Ernest Haeckel coined the term ecology, basically meaning the interactions between and among species and their environment. He was a naturalist and a professor and an extraordinary artist, and his passion was cataloguing new species, and he would collect them on research trips and ask seafarers to bring them from their expeditions around the world. And he was particularly fascinated with jellyfish. So these are a few of his images of creatures that you would still find nowadays in Carlingford Loch. So those are some anemones, some jellies. On the right there is the compass jelly that you have in Carlingford Loch. His drawings with all the detail are just incredible. Some fish, more jellies. Right, I think that's it. Oh, no, octopus. Squid. Somebody saw squid last night. There was little squids squirting out some ink, yeah, on this night dive last night. So he's not the only one who's combining art with citizen science. Some of our divers also do that. So he was, in a sense, doing underwater surveying. So that's been going on for centuries. And there seems to be now a surge of people, a real movement, a surge of people engaging with citizen scientists, doing surveying as a response to the climate crisis and loss of biodiversity. So there is something we can do and enjoy doing it. And scuba divers have privileged access to the underwater world and the ability to reveal the wonderful world hidden under the surface. Here in this room are several fabulous scuba divers who have been Sea Search trained in surveying, and are already contributing valuable data to the biodiversity databases. Okay, here's a clip by Frances, just a little picture of her surveyor's tools. So when she goes on a dive, she takes pictures, as Sandra does. Takes pictures, notes what she sees, writes it down on a little underwater slate thingy, comes back and fills that form, writes in habitats, species, type of seabed, depth, location, all kinds of things. And these forms are then sent in. Well, you're probably going to say all of this, aren't you? No, no. Anyway, so this is the surveyor's tools. I love this. It's like a puzzle for grown-ups, or really cool homework. So the Shifting Tides project, in partnership with Sea Search and Oceanauts Diving Centre, based on Ross Trevor. I don't know if Dane is here. He was going to try and make it. No, he was going to come, or try and come. Last summer ran a surveying training on Carlingford Lough in July last year with about 10 or 12 divers. So they came to learn how to do this. So it was don't want to say what, if you're allowed. No? Okay. So the first day was like looking, like the classification of all the creatures and the animals and plants and everything, what lives there. And then the second day was, and also how to do the forms. And then the second day was a couple of dives in Carlingford Lough and then filling in forms. And they have to do 5 forms which get checked. And if they've done 5 forms correctly, then they get a certificate and they're a citizen scientist. So the film that I'm making follows some of these divers on their journey to becoming citizen scientists and hopes to capture some of their passion for the underwater world. I'm only a newbie at this, and they're much better than me with a camera underwater. So I asked the divers to give me some of their underwater images for the film that I'm making. And I've been absolutely blown away by what they've seen and captured so beautifully under the waves. So here is a little taste. That was all filmed by the wonderful, amazing Phil Scott. So I've been filming with some of the divers, some of their stories, some of the Sea Search training, and I've got to edit a lot now over the summer, and it'll be done by the end of the summer. And then we're going to take it on tour to dive clubs, coastal communities, educational centres, and more, and some local events, hopefully, and aiming to inspire and invite more people to get involved through diving or snorkeling or by exploring the shore. And the intention is to contribute to the movement of people taking action to protect the marine environment.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you. So maybe, Claire, we'll start with you, but I'm going to ask the same question to Dave as well. This, mission of getting more people engaged, as Leah has, beautifully outlined there, why does community gathering data, filling in the forms, sending in the forms for other people to upload the forms, why is that so important in the work that you're doing as scientists?
Well, in short, it's mostly because we simply just don't know enough about this environment, and it's becoming increasingly or abundantly clear that our own livelihoods are very much hinging on the health of these ecosystems. Unfortunately, it's been a relationship with the ocean has been very much a kind of a take what we can without question and without consideration to the wider effects of what we're doing. So getting the community involved and getting them behind the monitoring of these really important habitats is a really crucial element of trying to actually protect them for future generations. I don't really think that you can effectively protect these environments without the buy-in of the local community, because they're the people that know it best. They're the ones that know it most intimately, and they're the ones that are best placed to actually go and monitor the health of these habitats in real time and see sort of the impacts that anthropogenic change is having.
Dave, same question.
Yeah, all that. And I suppose, look, if you think about what are the biggest challenges facing marine conservation, when we try and actually go and do useful things to protect the marine environment, some of the biggest challenges are lack of knowledge and awareness of the marine. That's where oceanicity projects such as the Irish Oceanicity Network comes into play, in just getting people, bigger numbers of people, more aware of what the ocean is, what it does for us, what we're doing to it. If you get down to the nitty gritty then of, let's say, declaring marine protected areas, you need data. And one of the biggest challenge, and it's a challenge that's always flagged at every consultation, every government report, every 6 years when we come to doing reporting to the EU on how we're doing or not doing, as the case might be, is lack of data. To put this in some perspective, the last major round Ireland survey of intertidal and shallow subtidal species and habitats was conducted in the mid-90s. So essentially, it's kind of ancient history at this stage. So we very much need new baselines. Explore Your Shore, that was one of our targets, really, was to create new baselines, fresh baselines for where species are and how they're doing. The good news is that you don't have to be a scuba diver to collect marine data and marine biodiversity data. You can do it intertidally. So Explore Your Shore focuses on the intertidal habitats, which are some of our most biodiverse habitats around the coastline, and asks people to go out on shore and record as many species as possible. A bit like Sea Search, we have a training program. Ours is Focus Online, so we have an online course which you can get through at your own leisure, at your own pace. And then we run annually, training sessions on the shore. The data then doesn't just sit there. It's important for citizen science that data is used where it's collected. So a lot of people kind of go, well, we record for this project or that project. That goes in a map, and sure, isn't that great? And we've done our bit. It is great, but it's even greater when we take that data and we use it. Why do we ask citizens to do that? Well, if you can imagine, as was the case with the last major intertidal survey in Irish waters, that you contract essentially a private outfit to go and do this work, it costs an absolute fortune. You're talking probably about millions to implement a coast-wide survey program over the course of a few years, 2, 3, 4 years. There's only so much of that the government's going to finance. So if you want to do something beyond that, or in between that, or to complement that, then citizen science is a great way of doing it. Some of our, indeed most of our, I would argue, long-term biodiversity data sets are citizen science generated. Think about birdwatch data sets going back 30 years, coastwatch data sets going back 30 plus years, Irish Round Dolphin Group, 30 plus years of data, all citizen science generated, because it's more affordable, it's more sustainable, and we can run those projects year after year after year. We use the data then. For example, if you've been recording for Explore Your Shore, that data most recently has been used in the Celtic Sea ecosystem assessment for marine planning and marine protected areas. So the data doesn't just sit on our database and create pretty maps. It's used by state agencies, other parties. It also goes to Europe. It also goes to a global database where it's used too. So it's important that the data is generated, but it's also utilized, and it contributes to some action on the ground.
Fantastic. Sandra, so you participated in the training by Sea Search, and you've participated, I think, you also have done the Explore Your Shore with Dave. And I think you're going to feature in the film I'm going to show too from Anna, of the body of water film. So what has been your experience under the surface of the loch like? And I guess, we talked a little bit about your motivation, but just like maybe just describe to us what it's like trying to gather data underwater and, yeah.
I suppose coming from the like a diving perspective, it's just really, really interesting because when you're under the water, there's so much to see. You can get kind of bamboozled with the amount, and sometimes when people start diving or snorkeling, you can't see anything because you don't know what to look for. But certainly with Sea Search, your eye becomes honed in, and you recognise what you're actually looking at. So the difference between seagrass and sea anemones or whatever seaweed, whatever it is, and you realise how important it is to biodiversity. And I think that it's just getting that knowledge and understanding what it is that you're actually looking at. And I think Sea Search has been so good at doing that because it just trains you into what it is that you're seeing and the importance of it in the water, and how everything, I suppose, is connected to make the sea so diverse in its marine habitat, and how everything works together in sequence so that it all it all just flows, I suppose. So for me, doing Sea Search has been fantastic because you really get to hone in on that skill, which as a diver is, as a recreational diver, I started diving just because I wanted to dive, but I suppose now you realise, okay, look at what you're looking at, how important something like seagrass is, for example. And again, going through this process and this Shifting Tides programme, looking at seagrass last year was really illuminating for me. I did not realise how important it is to the environment, how it stores so much carbon, how, I've just learned so much, and to be able to try and do something with that knowledge is so important to me now, because I suppose not everyone dives, but we're in a kind of a privileged position to be able to do something positive with that. So again, as we're talking about, you don't have to dive. You can snorkel, you can walk the shore intertidal, and really hone in on what it is that you're looking at. And I think the Shifting Tide programme has been brilliant for that, because it's offered so many opportunities to come together and really gain that knowledge. So for me personally, it's been brilliant. It's just been an eye-opener in so many ways, and then meeting such lovely people as well, and being involved in the projects like the films and the Necessary Stories with Anna last summer was just lovely experience for me and for everyone that was involved. So yeah, it's just been really good. Really
fantastic, good. Fantastic, Sandra. Thank you. And Claire, you listening to Sandra talking about being a recreational diver and the privilege of carrying out that sport, as it is it's an investment, isn't it, in time and energy and money. So is that similar in terms of what you're finding, what that sort of journey between I'm a recreational diver, or I'm a walker, or I'm a swimmer, that what is it that you find is what's in common that motivates the divers you meet, that encourages them to take those first steps, and then what keeps them engaged?
I suppose, yeah, it's something that's should be intrinsic in all of us as human beings, is simply curiosity. Just that need to know more. I think as we get older, we tend to fall into a little bit of a lull where we know what we know, and we're happy to just kind of keep it at the status quo. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, when they're diving, if you do have that kind of inherent interest in the life that's going on around you, not just the wrecks and the anthropogenic kind of elements of underwater diving. What other kind of diving is there? yeah, whenever you start to sort of look at the biological elements of what's going on, you kind of can't help but be curious about, what is that? And like, is that related to this? And I mean, it looks similar to that, but it's kind of acting in a different way and it's being found in different substrates. You kind of can't help but get yourself into that mindset of like, okay, I just want to know more. And once you find out what that is, you start to look even closer because like so much of what is going on under there is on such a microscopic scale. And once you start to realize that, you really start to get your eye in. And if you're into photography, then you want to get into macro photography and you want to get really, really good levels of detail. So that can motivate people to seek out sort of programs and training where they can get that information and get that kind of basis of understanding as to what they're actually seeing. And I think the thing that keeps them there is a sense of community, as Sandra said, meeting people who share that same interest, who maybe have a different kind of niche than you necessarily. So you can, I can go to this person if I need help with IDing this hydroid, or I can go to this person if I'm not sure what this red seaweed is. It's developing that sense of community and knowing that there is a group that you can go to that are going to be just as invested as you are as to what those things are. And the other element of it is feeling that the work that you're doing is actually going somewhere and, actually helping to some extent. As Dave said, it's all well and good having a project that collects data and puts it in a nice pretty picture or a nice pretty map or whatever, but if there's no sort of feasible outcomes of that at the end of the day, it can be a little bit of a dissuasion if you're not really seeing sort of what the outcomes of that are at the end of the day. So it is really important for those projects to have very clear outcomes that volunteers can see the results of.
And maybe a wee bit more on that from yourself or from Dave about, have you any concrete examples? You started to name some of them, Dave, about the Celtic Sea piece. Like where is your data going as well from Sea Search? Is it feeding into the same national data sets? Is it and Ulster Wildlife? And maybe something about that cross-jurisdictional sharing of data, because we're on the border lock, and you're both working with different agencies. So do you want to just give us a sense of who gets to use it, and do communities also get to use it in their own actions, and if so, how?
Yeah, good question. Where does the data go? Well, the data initially will go into the individual projects. So if you're a Sea Search diver, initially you submit your data to Sea Search. Sea Search then go through a validation process to check the accuracy of the data. And it goes into the Sea Search database. Now, for Irish waters, that Sea Search data gets shared back to the National Biodiversity Data Centre. So it's mapped on our system, and it's mapped as open access data. So open access data means anyone can go onto the National Biodiversity Data Centre website and download that data set to do with as you see fit. It may be an art project, it may be a research project, it may be a community conservation project wants to use that information. The same with Explore Your Shore data. It is stored and mapped as open access data. So that's the ideal at the National Biodiversity Data Centre. That's what we strive for. Not all data sets are open access. Even if they're citizen science generated, sometimes, especially if they're NGO linked, the NGOs will maybe try and generate some finances out of those data. So for example, if a big company wants to use a data set that has been generated through NGO citizen science, sometimes that organization will ask them to pay for it. You might say, but that was our data, we gave it for free. And you did, but it still cost that NGO a lot of money to help generate that data, because the training costs money, the resources, the publications, the online training, the websites, the staff to run it, all costs money. So in some cases, NGOs will endeavour to generate some return income from that data. I don't think any NGO that I've ever come across has balked at the problem of sharing data with a community-based conservation project for free. But if you're a big company and you can afford to pay for it, they'll ask to pay for it. For the National Biodiversity Data Centre, we're essentially a government-funded entity, so the data is generated as open access. So yeah, I mean, the killer is, I suppose, in a way, because our data is open access, a lot of the time we don't know what's done with it. So we do know when a bigger government agency comes to us and says we want these data from these areas, then we know it's been used for that purpose. But in a lot of cases, the data will be downloaded from the website and used for research or whatever purpose, but we don't necessarily get to hear about that. And that's fine. That's part of the process. In a world full of wizardry and digital tracking, at some point we might be able to track each bit of data and find out where it goes and what it's used for. Maybe it's better we don't. Maybe we don't need to know all the time what the data is used for. But the important thing is it's there and it's available.
Leah, I was wondering, I mean, as a creative storyteller, so going back to that as well as the diver and the citizen science, and because we're at an Ocean Literacy Network regional meeting, what do you think is the importance, I suppose, of this kind of climate action? So Shifting Tides has been funded by Creative Ireland. It didn't come from a science-funded project; it came from a creative-funded project. What do you think the creative storytelling has brought to, this mission, if you like, of gathering more information and literacy around our oceans?
Well, I think, film as a medium, obviously, watching that, you're sort of immersed in it. I think it does cultivate a sort of an emotional connection. Obviously, film also can literally show things that you wouldn't otherwise see. So it's often been said on the Shifting Tides project about to reveal when you look at Carlingford Lough, you see the surface, the lovely view reflected. To be able to access underneath and show that is fantastic, and it's kind of an immersive experience to see that. The storytelling side of it is just to hear people's stories, how they got involved is fascinating, what it means to them in their lives. It's really connecting people with the place and with the marine environment in that way. Also, I think the process of storytelling, or in this case, making the film, people reflect on their own stories maybe as they're part of the story and how they want their story to turn out, I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but
Perfect.
And there's just one other aspect, is that through the process of making this film, we put together another survey dive a few weeks ago to have it in the film, but also to have Shifting Tides wanted to generate more of the data by having a survey dive. So bringing back together some of the divers who had done the surveying training with Sea Search a year ago, have them come back. Unfortunately, only one of them could come back. But she managed to bring in some other divers who were previously Sea Search trained, who got sort of reinvigorated in their surveying techniques, and they really were happy to have the opportunity to come back to a survey dive with Sea Search there to support with identifying species and so on. And then there was still space, so Dane of Oceanauts was able to invite some of his own divers. So there were new people who are not yet Sea Search trained. They now got a taste of surveying. So he guided them, and afterwards he showed them how to do the identifying and stuff. So in a way, to continue the story and to create an event that was to generate data, but also to continue the story for the film, it actually got a whole lot more divers involved. So in a sense, the process of filmmaking itself had an effect, which will be lasting. And now they all want Sea Search training, so you're going to have to do some more Sea Search training.
Yeah, I mean, there is this perception that arts and science are mutually exclusive. They're not, far from it. When you're training someone, when you're trying to inspire someone to learn, when you're trying to teach them, for let's say, a long list of species, how boring would it be? If I stood up on stage, I just listed off, I showed you a picture of each species and went, well, this is that, and this is that, and this is that, and 3 hours later, and that, and we got through 400 species and you were all fast asleep, snoring. It wouldn't be very good at all. So, I mean, part of what I think anyone does when they're running a training course is weave stories in through the information, you know. So I passed on the road in today, I was looking at the looking for this place, and I passed a house that had Nocella as the name on the house. And Nocella, of course, is Nocella lepillus, which is the dog whelk. And that's one of the, you know, certainly if you're talking to kids, and most time when you're talking to adults, describing the feeding behavior of the dog whelk is only delightful because it drills a little hole in the shell of its prey, injects its digestive juices, turns it into a slush puppy and sucks it back out. And then what you find on the shore is thousands of shells with perfectly drilled little holes in the shells. They're being drilled by the dog whelk in the process of predating. So stories like that bring science to life. People would literally lapse into a coma if you just listed off a big long list of species and show them pictures. Also, stories behind why the blazes you're bothering collecting this information. You look at the title of Shifting Tides, and you look at one of the biggest issues that we have in marine conservation, which is shifting baselines. So you kind of go, what's a baseline? Well, baseline is a level at which you kind of go, well, this is what everything looks like at the moment. And then 10 years' time, if we survey it again, it'll have changed, and that'll be a new baseline. If you go back in history, let's say the Loch, and you read descriptions, there's a book written by a guy called Nixon, who was a sea angler, big sea angler in Northern Ireland in the 1970s. And he describes coming to fish in Carlingford Loch back then. And what he was catching would blow your mind. I mean, huge common skate, lots of different species, big shark, probably angel shark at the time. He also describes periods where there was competitions for angling, where lots of, you know, in those days it was a derby style competition. You would catch as much as you can, land it on the pier, weigh it, chuck it in a skip, and it would all go to landfill. So if you're wondering where the fish went, that's where some of it went. But there's descriptions of what was here, not a million years ago, but just back in the 1970s, would blow your mind. If you go further back again and you read the descriptions of the size of the oyster beds in Carlingford Loch, and the fact that, you know, back in the day, there was not just 1 or 2 sea angling boats active in the loch, there was dozens and dozens of boats, because there was the fish there to sustain that level of activity. It gives you some perspective of what's been lost. So unless we record baselines, we've no starting block to work off of. We don't know either what's changed over the past 10, 20, 30, 40 years, nor do we know what we could restore habitats to if we give them the chance to recover. So it's important that those stories are collected as part of our process of historic baselines. And you won't get the data because no one was recording in the same way that we're recording now, but you will get the stories. So often by talking to people or going through history books, you'll get the stories which describe the habitats long ago.
Fantastic, yeah. And we have Declan Mallon is here in the audience, and he's been collecting oral histories as part of his own work and part of Shifting Tides around the loch. And we, you know, honed in on the ones that talked about what people experienced on the shore and all of that. So maybe going, and we kind of thought about it as, you know, the past we need to know about, the present we are aware of, you know, but the vision of the future is something that's, I suppose, in our imaginal world as well as our scientific projection world. So maybe we'll begin to wrap up this panel by hearing your own individual and then maybe your organizational vision for kind of, can you imagine a future where citizen data feeds in that is, like give us another 10 years or 20 years, either to what's happened, that citizen science data, what's happened to your own practices, and then maybe what is, one of our goals, I suppose, with Shifting Tides, when we were asked, by the funders, what do you hope comes of this, all this activity? And we said, well, we hope we've just created some of the conditions in which restoration work can take root deeper. We know there is a great deal of interest for years, and Richard Nairn, who we had talk in Carlingford Loch Club last year, he's written a book on restoration, and he said he was in conservation for nearly 50 years, and he said he really had to step back and say conservation didn't work. He was involved in setting up of Birdwatch Ireland, for example. And so now what we really need to be talking about is restoration, and that's a shift in, from protection to actively changing conditions. So do you want to just wrap up with a bit of a visionary statement around if it all worked, if this community on both sides of the loch, if the agencies, if your organisations, what could be achieved, and how do you see it coming about? So we'll start with Dave and we'll work our way back along.
Yeah, I suppose for the data center, our job is really to monitor change over time. So my ideal for citizen science when it comes to intertidal, subtidal, whatever it is that it keeps going, because, we want to monitor change, whether it's decline or increase. It's going to be very depressing if it's just continuously monitoring decline. Obviously, that's not ideal. So we need those data to feed into actions that will bring about improvements in ecosystems. But we also need long-term data sets, because some change is kind of permanent, if you like, unless we do something to reverse it. Other change is cyclical. So we have long-term cycles that occur in nature. And we need years, 30 plus years of data at a minimum to start understanding long-term cycles in ecosystems and marine ecosystems. So you need a lot of data to figure all this stuff out. My hope for the future is that we get our act together, we get marine protected areas in place. Marine protected areas doesn't mean sticking in the ribs to any particular sector of society or any particular stakeholder in the marine. You can have marine protected areas that support a healthy fishing industry. You can have marine protected areas that support ecotourism. You can have marine protected areas that support biodiversity. But we need to take action to give the sea a chance to recover. Unless we do that, nothing's going to change. We're just going to keep recording decline into the point at which there's nothing left in the sea, barring extremely robust things like shrimp, for example, that cope with a lot of disturbance and a lot of damage to their habitats. If we do something, if we implement marine protected areas, if those marine protected areas are properly managed with ambitious goals and targets, and good monitoring, then the sea will recover to some extent. As someone said earlier, you may not get what was there originally. In fact, in many cases, you won't, because the level of damage to the seabed means that features, for example, that used to support oyster reefs are gone. They've been leveled flat. So unless you actually take major measures to reinstall those kind of bottom features, you're not going to get an oyster reef back, but you may get something else back. What is missing, I think, from our large areas of our seabed is, if you go back into old reports and stories of when steam trawling first started, about 200 odd years ago, a bit more now, the description of the net fishermen was the masses of material that they used to find floating on the surface whenever the steam trawlers had passed by. Because in those days, the whole seabed was a mass of life. It was, in shallow waters, there were seaweeds and short turf of animals and bivalves, etc. Once you trawl that once, it's changed, possibly permanently. A lot of that material is removed. If you give it a chance, it will recover. So something will start growing on the seabed again. If you think about the loch out here, we've got a deep water channel that's dredged regularly, so things aren't going to recover there in the long term. But either side of it, you've had major changes due to the type of aquaculture that's ongoing in the loch. But even then, if you give the seabed enough time to recover, it will build up a flora and a fauna, and that flora and fauna will support the small organisms, which support the bigger organisms, which support the kind of stuff we all get excited about, sharks and big fish and whales and dolphins, that kind of thing. The main thing is a chance to recover. We need to give the sea a chance.
Sandra, and especially as a member of the local community, I guess, what would be your vision for how you can what would you see possible? What might happen around this community?
I suppose a number of things. Well, as you've just said so well there, you know, to give things a chance to recover is so important, and to understand how these, you know, sea creatures and organisms all work together to support humans. You know, so for example, seagrass, you know, taking in carbon dioxide more so than trees do. Again, they need to be protected, and the only way that can be protected is through humans protecting them. So raising awareness of their importance, that we have seagrass in Carlingford Loch. I'm sure lots of people aren't even aware of that, and the benefits of it to the environment, and how it can be protected in a way that is sustainable into the future. You know, and I suppose building on that, from my own point of view, living here and having the, you know, incredible privilege of being able to dive on the shores, it shows me how much life there is in the loch. And it's always a surprise when I talk to people who don't dive, to explain just how vast that is. There is a huge amount of marine life under the water. Obviously not in the channel, but off it there is. And to be able to say, well, yeah, we do need to protect this in whatever way we can. We don't have to be divers to be able to do that, you know. And going forward, building community strengths, like this project of Shifting Tides, to continue it forward so that we have a community that is passionate about protecting what is in the sea, and again, is not ours, is marine life. It has always been there for hundreds and thousands and millions of years, and even when we're gone, how, you know, what small contribution can we make in our lifetime to keep that marine life? Because it's, you know, we are just custodians, really. It's the future, what's going to happen in the next generation and the next generation. So for me, I just see ourselves as a very small piece in that puzzle, but a very important piece as well, because again, knowledge is the most important thing that we need to know, how we can protect it. And certainly projects like this make you more aware that there are things that we can do, you know, and no matter how small that is or how insignificant that may feel, it's still really important. You know, we don't have to be the big companies, the Port Authority. We don't have to have that kind of, you know, stance, but whatever we do can make a difference. So that's my hope for the future, that we have a better marine environment for our future generations as well.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Sandra. Leah.
I'd love to see a great white shark in the loch. No, I mean, I know. What would that mean? I don't know. Okay, I was just kidding. Just kidding. Because they are not the enemy. But anyway, yeah, no, I 100% agree. I suppose it'd be great to see, again, talking about divers, more that divers could get engaged in, more projects, more roles for divers in restoration projects. Like I was inspired by finding out about coral transplanting, that sort of thing, that sort of thing. So I guess more opportunities for divers to become involved in restoration projects, which would require training, but also training in how to dive carefully. And I know that Dane of Oceanauts is he's developing a course to teach more specific skills for doing surveying, because you're multitasking. You've got your slate, your camera, extra things, and you can lose your buoyancy and make a mess and stand on things and things. So it's like more specific training that will lead to more engagement of divers in restoration projects. And then also the opportunity to film things and make people more aware of what is there, you know, increasing that sort of thing. And also raising awareness about lifestyle choices and how that impacts the loch. Everyday life, not just I'm going to work on this restoration, but how everything I do in my life has an impact. That sort of thing, I think, yeah.
Thanks, Leah. Claire, what's your vision for what Sea Search could bring about?
Okay.
And in that wider picture of like the marine protection or...
Yeah. I was going to sort of come from a more personal standpoint.
Go for it.
But,
Start with the personal.
Sure. Yeah, for myself, I mean, so many of the points that I would make have already been made so eloquently by my fellow panelists, so I'll not sort of go on too much. But I think it's, for me, what's really important is trying to develop that sense of sort of local knowledge and support within communities, coastal communities themselves, so that they feel empowered to advocate for their local biodiversity. And because programs and training like Sea Search, like Explore Your Shore, really, really important for giving people that baseline understanding, that knowledge. But in the long term, there's no guarantee that, you know, charity-led projects will continue to have funding, will continue to be available. So one of the things that, you know, I really want to see sort of in place within the next few years, would be lovely, is that empowerment of the local communities, so that they are able to support each other and to maintain that ongoing training and knowledge within their own communities, so they can be more effective in going forward and lobbying government and their local MPs to actually give a, you know, to give a damn, to put it politely, about those environments, because it's one thing for it to come from a national or regional organisation, you know, that has, you know, a public-facing persona, but to come from the actual people who live there is often far more profound, especially to local politicians who are depending on your vote. It's a lot more profound, in my opinion, than coming from, yeah, a corporate kind of factor. So for me, yeah, the support of those local communities and sort of getting that baseline knowledge there, so that can be passed down, especially knowing what is local to you. It's one thing to be proud of sort of the All Ireland kind of biodiversity, but if you know sort of what specific communities and species are unique to the loch or even to a specific area within the loch, that's even more powerful than just like an overall sort of general interpretation of how important the ocean is. Because I mean, we can say that till we're blue in the face, but if you can go out and give specific examples and why you're advocating for that and why it's important to you as a local citizen, honestly, it's some of the most powerful rhetoric that you can throw at people in power, in my opinion.
Fabulous, thank you. So just to mention that if people want to take a next step today along this citizen science journey, you can speak to folk that are here. On the Shifting Tides website, we have links to the Explore Your Shore course, but we can get it direct on the National Biodiversity Centre. Claire, if people want to learn more about Sea Search, I presume it's similar. We've got some links on Shifting Tides, but is there any other way people can take a next step to, if, as Leah says, they're activated to get engaged?
Yeah, even if you just Google Sea Search, all one word, there's two websites that you'll be primarily interested in. So there's the Sea Search UK website, and then there's also the Sea Search Ireland website, seasearch.ie. So check out both of those. If there is any upcoming training courses or anything like that, sometimes there'll be online courses offered over Zoom as well. They'll be advertised under the training tab on the website, so do feel free to check it out.
And Sandra, locally, are people in the dive club beginning to, and I know we do have Morris here from the new Lock Keepers Cross Lock Network. So Morris, you might just stand up for 2 seconds so as people can see who you are. So this is Morris here. Yes, and Fanula. So they're part of a new cross-lock network that are trying to make it, and something that we wanted and hoped would happen out of bringing people back and forth at different events across the lock. And people said to us very early on, we've always wanted there to be a round the lock network. It's just been hard to do. So it's really exciting to hear that you're trying to do that. So later on, we're going to be getting you into discussion groups and you'll get to meet with people. But just wanted you to know, Sandra, is there anything else locally that you're aware of that people can connect with?
Well, I suppose from my own point of view, I dive with Dundalk Subaqua, and we would take on trainees every year or every second year. And you don't have to, obviously, you don't have to be a diver to train. We train you. So if anyone here was interested in doing some diving and starting off, that we're more than happy for new people to come on board, because it rejuvenates the club, and as in my experience, then more people who are diving, more people who are interested in things like sea search and want to get involved in that training too as they progress with their diving. So again, if anyone is interested, please come and speak to myself or my colleagues here today about it, and we're more than happy to talk more about how to become a diver, recreational diver.